ਸਬਰੰਗ ਰੇਡੀਓ 94.7 ਸੁਣ ਰਹੇ ਸਾਰੇ ਲਿਸਨਰਸ ਦਾ ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰੀ ਫਿਰ ਤੋਂ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਜੀ ਅੱਜ ਦੇ ਇਸ ਖੂਬਸੂਰਤ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ 'ਚ ਜਿਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਆਪਾਂ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰਨ ਜਾ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਸਾਡੇ ਲੋਕਲ MLA ਲਿਜਤ ਤਹਾਦਾ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਿ ਕਾਫੀ ਵਧੀਆ ਕੰਮ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ ਐਜ਼ ਏ ਕ੍ਰਿਟਿਕ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਅਤੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਰੋਲ ਵੀ ਕਾਫੀ ਇੰਪ੍ਰੈਸਿਵ ਹੈ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਪਿਛਲੇ ਕੁਝ ਸਮੇਂ ਤੋਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਇਹ ਰੋਲ ਅਡੋਪਟ ਕੀਤਾ ਨਾਲ ਦੀ ਨਾਲ ਹੀ ਵਧੀਆ ਕੰਮ ਵੀ ਕਰਕੇ ਦਿਖਾਇਆ ਸੋ ਅੱਜ ਆਪਾਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰਨ ਜਾ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਸੋ ਲਿਜਤ ਵੈਲਕਮ ਟੂ ਸਬਰੰਗ ਰੇਡੀਓ
Thank you so much, Rajesh. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so it's wonderful to have you here when everywhere we are talking about the immigration and you are an immigration critic for Alberta. Um, so first of all,
Shadow
tell us.
Minister of Immigration and Multiculturalism is the
Yeah,
whole name. Yeah.
yes. So tell us about how you get into politics. Like, what motivates you to get into politics?
Sure. Well, I was born here in Alberta, actually, in Edmonton.
Okay.
And then my parents moved down to Calgary when I was about 2.5. So I've lived in Alberta all my life, with immigrant parents, and they really struggled, right? The
Yeah.
jobs that were available to them at the time didn't pay very much. So we lived in poverty for a lot of my childhood. So I saw the struggles of what happens, when people are working hard, so hard, doing cleaning jobs. My dad was a welder. My mom used to clean hotel rooms, and how much they struggle, even when they're working so hard, right?
That's right.
So
Yeah.
having that experience,
Mm.
but then also, my family was always very conscious of what was happening in politics around them, and back home, right? Back home from my
Yeah.
mom and dad, which was El Salvador.
Mm.
And it made me very conscious of how whatever a government decides impacts how well your family can do sometimes, right?
That's right.
And so I became more and more aware of that. And then in about, I think it was around 2012 when Jason Kenney was the immigration minister federally, and he had made decisions to take away healthcare from certain groups of refugees. And I had a very close family member who worked serving those families in healthcare. And what she would see was that if someone didn't get healthcare, like say when you're pregnant and you're waiting, you're expecting a baby, if you don't get the healthcare that you need when you are pregnant,
Mm-hmm.
there can be lots of really serious problems. And so she would see the impact of not having a doctor in pregnancy and how that would affect the health of that child and the situation for that family for life, right?
Yeah.
And not for any good reason. And so that was, I think, hearing the story of one child who ended up with some pretty serious, serious
Mm.
medical conditions because his mom couldn't get health care, that made a big difference for
Yeah.
me. And it was when I started volunteering for the NDP. And then from volunteering with the NDP, I ended up working in the offices. I did something completely different before that. I worked in the apparel industry in product
Oh.
development. But it's always been really important to me, like when you look at your community around you, how can I help? So that was really what started my journey into politics, was volunteering, then working, and then getting involved in the party on policy, and then getting asked to run, and I'm happy that I did. I feel like it's a really important time right now to be involved.
Yeah, no, definitely that's awesome. Like you started your journey from the grassroots and by getting motivation through the immigrant issues, and you are doing wonderful so far, and that's why you
Oh,
are
thank you.
having this critical role of immigration and multiculturalism. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's awesome. And Premier of Alberta, UCP Premier basically, Daniel Smith, she is putting everything on the immigrants and whatever wrong
Mhm.
is happening over here, either it's a budget or whatever, she's putting everything on the immigration and immigrant people. So, what would you like to say about that?
Well, first of all, there's a lot of misinformation going around, right? We know that she's
Yeah.
going to be calling a referendum in the fall. with a lot of questions, misleading questions on immigration, right?
Yeah,
And I think that what's happening here is you have a government that's been in power for 7 years, right?
that's a yeah.
And we know that, like, every Albertan that I talk to,
Hmm.
their main concerns are, how am I going to pay my bills? How am I going to pay my electricity? How am I going to pay my groceries and my rent? Right?
That's right. Yeah,
How am I going to get a good job, especially for some of our younger people coming up right now? I'm a mom as well of two teenagers, right? So
that's it.
this
Yeah,
is something that's very real to me. These are the things that people are worried about. And healthcare, getting access to a family doctor. Um, these are the things that people are worried about. But because this government hasn't done the proper planning, they haven't managed our budget responsibly. They're giving out money in contracts where they could be saving money in public services. Instead, they're doing lots of privatization. And so what we have here is a premier and a government that's not doing its job. And so what they're doing now is they're blaming some of the most vulnerable people, right?
that's right.
Instead of taking responsibility. And so there's an old saying that says, whenever you point fingers, there's three more pointing back at you. And I would say those three fingers are pointing back at this government for not planning for growth. Like, a lot of this population growth was not a surprise. And then the premier herself did a multi-million-dollar campaign asking for more people to come to Alberta. So it's like you have a dinner party for 10, you invite 100, and then you blame everyone who showed up
That's
when you
right.
just
Yeah.
didn't prepare. She didn't prepare. And this government, what she's saying about immigration, unfortunately, is a lack of accountability, and it has real consequences for anyone who's racialized, I think, in this province, and immigrant people who, like, I was raised by hardworking immigrants. We know people work so hard, and so no one's going to ask face to face. They're not going to know if someone is a citizen or not a citizen, or is permanent resident. But what's happening is that people are starting to feel the impacts of hate. We know that hate crimes are on the rise. We
That's
know
right.
that that's impacting especially South Asian folks, right? Where
Yeah,
people just,
recently we have seen so many murders happen to the young people, immigrant people. They were hardworking and doing wonderful in this province, and unfortunately, they have to die because of the comments like this, and racism is on the very much at the peak.
well, and I've heard the government, members of the government, argue that that we can't say that that's why it is, but we know we've seen the same sort of language coming from south of the border with Donald Trump. And we know that when people are hurting, because everyone is going through an affordability crisis right now,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
If you have a government that's actively saying that that immigrants are the cause of all of these pressures instead of their mismanagement, it makes sense that you'll start to see people looking for someone to blame, and instead of blaming, what we need is a government that takes responsibility, that is planning for growth, that is focusing on the things that Albertans want them to focus on instead of blaming.
That's right. Yeah, it's really bad. Like government should be helping people instead of blaming on them, and especially when you are inviting more and more people coming here, and immigrants consider, okay, this government is looking good. They are asking us to join Alberta. I know a lot of people came here. They invested here as well, and that's why in Alberta we have seen a lot of money is coming in through these people
Mm-hmm.
and buying housing and other things so that they can help the economy. But now government is
Mm-hmm.
blaming them, or premier blame them directly, which is not a, very good sign from this government. And now legislation is back, and yesterday there was a lot of things happening.
Mm-hmm.
So what would you like to say about that? Like how was your experience about that?
Well, sure. Yesterday, we were very, very proud. Our member from St. Albert, Marie Renault, who has been a champion for folks with disabilities for a long, long time, put forward legislation on accessibility. So
Mm.
that is so that people who have different disabilities have more access to the world that they live in, right? So it talks about how we build structures, um, how people can access online government services, all of those things to make it more accessible. And we're one of only two provinces in the country that doesn't have accessibility legislation.
Hmm.
And even the US has the American with Disabilities Act, right? So these are things that are normal in many jurisdictions, and we don't have that. And so she proposed that. The UCP voted it down, and not for good reasons. So
That's right.
um,
Yeah, it's a
this
very
is
much
a
required, and it directly looks like they are again targeting these people. Those are not able to help, and Disability Act should be in place, just like the other provinces.
yes, it should bring us in line with the other provinces. And the other thing that I did mention yesterday was that at any point in our lives, because we're human, one day we will need accessibility, right? We
That's
can
right.
see this in our aging population as well. And so a lot of this legislation just makes sense. We also discussed the budget yesterday, and what we talked about is how this government has had 7 years in office with record resource revenues. So the most revenues from the energy sector, and how just a few years ago they were talking about how we had a surplus, and now we are in a deficit. So where did all of that money go is the question that I'm getting asked by a lot of people. And yesterday when we were talking about the budget, we were talking about how they have this deficit, and people still can't find a doctor. People still are having trouble getting jobs, and they're still having trouble paying their bills. And so this government has done nothing to help folks and to help Albertans in this affordability crisis. And instead, we have a giant deficit and no path to balance. Like, at least, when we were in government in the NDP from 2015 to 2019, there were deficits. We were coming out of very like low oil prices. And even with that, we had a path to get out of the debt. And this government passed a law so that they have to have a plan to get out of debt. And they just broke their own laws, right? So they
That's
passed
right.
those, and now they don't have a plan to get out of debt. So we were talking a lot about that and the corruption that we're seeing. We have a government that where the premier is taking trips that are gifts from princes
That's right.
in the Middle East, and then also changing a lot of rules so that she can be allowed to receive those gifts. We used to have limits on gifts, now we don't, but that's because of changes that they made. So we need a government that is ethical, that gets things done for Albertans, that helps them on affordability, and we don't have that right now. But I have hope on the horizon that we will, with Naheed Nenshi as premier and with an Alberta New Democrat government.
No, definitely that will be good. But that's why, like you mentioned in Rachel Notley's NDP government, we were very good. Like throughout this, it was full tenure, and no one blame on NDP about any corruption or anything. But this government, whenever UCP is in the power or conservatives are in the power, they always lose their premier after 3 4 years. Their own people
Um,
throw them down, and basically because they were so much involved into the corruption or leadership kamikaze or whatever we have seen in the past. So I think it's good. Like NDP is doing good, and we wish
Thank
you and
you.
your team good
And
luck
and
for.
we're
Mm.
Canadians. We're Canadians and Albertans.
Yes, sir.
We don't need to make it easier for separatists, right?
That's right.
And
Yeah.
that also is not good for our economy, right? So
Yeah, it's
yeah,
hurting
we
economy
need a
very
change.
badly. Already people are very much confused about their investments and work, like where they will be investing and what will be happening if this referendum will be, which is next to impossible, we all know, but ultimately it is impacting people because referendum or the separation is not real, basically, we can say, but it's definitely impacting all of us.
Yeah, it's not good for our economy. So
Yes,
yeah, I would say it's a busy time in the legislature. We'll keep fighting, right? And we'll keep
yes,
advocating for the things that Albertans really care about, like education and healthcare, and a good, being able to get a good job and to afford their bills. Those are the things that people elected us to take care of and to advocate for, right? So that's what the government should be focused on. But
that's
we'll
right.
keep pushing.
And they are
Hmm.
continuously pushing the teachers and healthcare workers, whatever the way they are doing things. I think that's not good for Albertans. So UCP should be doing something better than what we are expecting from them.
Yeah, and I think really, like people will sometimes ask me, like, what can I do, right?
Yeah,
And really, I think, be always in communication with your political representatives, right? Tell them what you're concerned about. Tell them what you want to see in, like, what you want to see change, and get more involved that way, right? So I think it's one thing for us as opposition members to put the pressure on, but they really need to hear from everyday folks who are struggling, right?
that's right.
And who want to see better, and you deserve better. You deserve better government.
That's right. And right now, like um Minister of Immigration and Multiculturalism and associate also. I don't think they are doing enough for these people. Even our associate minister is from the immigrant community, but he is hardly speaking anything for immigrant people.
I
So
mean, I won't speak on individuals, but I think that what we know is that for our societies to do well, we need to think about, when we talk about immigration, everybody always thinks about, like they talk in terms of insiders and outsiders, right? But the truth of the matter is we're all neighbors, right?
that's idea.
If my neighbor is not doing well, then probably not a lot of people around me are doing well, right?
That's
So I think that's the conversation, is that we all need each other, and we need to make sure that all of us are doing well. Like I said, I grew up with poor immigrant parents. When I worked in the apparel industry, a lot of the workers that I worked with who were in the sewing factories, believe it or not, we used to have sewing factories in Calgary. A lot
Mm,
of them were raising kids and putting them through university, but they weren't making very much money, right? Those are
that's
all people. So when we talk about economic migration and all of that, yes, we need people who will build businesses and create jobs. And those workers, though, too, they're also very important, and they have an important role, and they raise families. And all of us need to be doing well.
no, that's a wonderful message. And before I let you go, anything else you want to share with our listeners?
Just that sometimes things can feel really tough, right? And they are tough right now. We're suffering through, affordability. There's global uncertainty. There's conflict all over the world, and news stories that can feel really dark at times. And I think we just need to remember to think about who the helpers are, but also to keep speaking up for what you want to see, and not lose hope, and keep your public officials accountable, right? Keep in
That's
touch.
right.
Like, I have an office. You can find me on the internet. You can email my office or call my office if you live in my constituency. Then I often have meetings with constituents. But find out who your elected officials are, reach out and let them know what's on your mind.
No, perfect. And congratulations once again on your re-election, like nomination. Now you are candidate.
Yes, I just got nominated. I'll be
Yes.
running again in the next election. I'm excited.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's an honor.
And can you give a little bit like the area from where you are running so that listeners can know?
Sure, Calgary-Klein. So it's in central northeast, northwest, and it has a little bit of southeast. Now, by the end of this week, we should hear about the electoral boundaries changing. And so right now, what I represent is an area that I'll describe as everything between Nose Hill and the Peter Lougheed Hospital, all the way almost to Forest Lawn. So 17th Avenue is the border. I represent a lot of communities in the Northwest. In the Northeast, it's like a Vista, places like Winston Heights, and I've got Tuxedo as well, and North Haven, and Thorncliffe.
Yeah.
And then I've got a couple of communities even that have the Southeast, so Albert Park, Radisson, and Mayland Heights. So it's a big, big area, but any one of your listeners can find out which area they're in. They can find my MLA in Google,
Yes.
and they'll be able to tell what area that they're in and see who their representative is.
No, that's awesome. So, thank you very much, and good luck to you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to chat with your listeners. I hope you have a great week, and thanks so much for the time.
Thank you, and have a wonderful day. Thanks.
You too. Thanks, Rajesh.
Thank you.